The screen opens on a rain-slicked rooftop at the edge of a neon-lit city. The kind of place where the lights never go out and the shadows never quite disappear. You hear it before you see it. The low thrum of tension. A city breathing beneath its own weight. Somewhere below, a siren wails and then fades. Up here, everything is still. Steven Seagal steps into the light. His silhouette is unmistakable. Broad. Calm. Impossibly still. He doesn't pace. He doesn't fidget. He simply stands there like a wall that decided to become a man. His eyes scan the rooftop slowly, methodically, the way a chess player studies a board before touching a single piece. You get the feeling he's already seen everything. Already calculated every shadow, every angle, every possible exit. His long dark coat catches the wind. He lets it. Nothing about him rushes. Nothing about him panics. He is patience wearing human skin. And then across the rooftop, from the opposite edge, Tony Jaa appears. He doesn't walk in. He arrives. 1 second the space is empty. The next, he's there. Crouched low, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, arms loose at his sides, eyes burning like 2 points of fire in the dark. Everything about him says movement. Even when he's still, he looks like something about to explode. His breathing is controlled, but you can feel the energy underneath it, coiled tight, pressing against the surface. Where Seagal is a wall, Jaa is a storm that hasn't decided which direction to move yet. The rain picks up slightly. Neither man speaks. A loose piece of metal sheeting somewhere behind them groans against the wind, and both men's eyes flicker toward the sound at exactly the same moment. That single shared reflex tells you everything. These two are operating on a completely different level than anyone you've ever seen. Their senses aren't just sharp. They're alive in a way that most people's aren't. Awake to everything. Missing nothing. You feel something tighten in your chest. You don't know who to root for yet. You don't even know what you're watching yet. But you can't look away. Seagal shifts his weight by half an inch. That's it. Just half an inch. And somehow Tony Jaa catches it. His chin drops by a fraction of a degree in response. Two giants communicating in a language that has no words. The air between them feels thick, like the space itself is filling with something invisible and heavy. Every breath you take feels louder than it should. A distant light flickers. Shadows stretch and shrink and stretch again. Somewhere far below, the city moves and breathes and laughs, and carries on completely unaware of what is unfolding 20 stories above it. Up here, time has slowed down. Up here, the whole world has narrowed to this rooftop, this rain, these two men, and whatever is about to happen between them. You feel your heartbeat in your ears. And then Seagal moves. Not fast. That's the thing that surprises you first. He doesn't explode forward like a cannon. He glides. One smooth, unhurried step that somehow covers enormous ground. And his right hand is already redirecting before you even registered that Tony Jaa had thrown anything. That's the genius of his style. By the time you see what Steven Seagal is doing, he's already done it. The movement already happened. You're just catching up. His technique is a language built from decades of practice. Every response preloaded. Every angle anticipated. He doesn't react to what you do. He responds to what you were going to do. Jaa pulls back instantly. No wasted motion. No stumbling. He's already somewhere else, feet barely skimming the wet surface, repositioning with a speed that makes your eyes feel slow. He lands in a crouch, and his body language has completely changed. He's read something in that exchange. Learned something. You can see it in his face. Not fear. Never fear. Understanding. He's recalibrating. The way a brilliant athlete adjusts at halftime. The way someone who has trained their whole life knows how to respond to new information in real time. He rises from the crouch. And now he comes with everything. Tony Jaa's fighting style is unlike anything else on earth. It comes from Muay Thai, which is one of the oldest and most devastating combat arts ever created by human beings. But in Jaa's hands, it becomes something beyond a system. It becomes a force of nature. His elbows move like the edge of an axe. His knees drive forward with the power of something much larger than a single human body should be able to generate. His kicks don't just connect, they resonate. You feel them even watching from a distance. The sound they make against whatever surface they find cuts through the rain and the wind and lands somewhere in your stomach. He goes high with a spinning kick. Seagal ducks it. Barely. His body bending with an economy of motion that looks almost lazy until you realize that the kick missed his head by less than the width of your hand. He doesn't stumble back. He pivots. And from the pivot comes a joint lock attempt so fast that Jaw's wrist is already turning the wrong direction before either of them has fully registered the contact. Jaw wrenches free. He rolls, comes up, steps back 3 paces and reassesses. Seagal's calm redirection versus Jaw's explosive knees. Who wins? Both men breathing now. Really breathing. The rain hammers down harder, and the neon signs below reflect in the puddles that have formed across the rooftop. Red and blue and yellow light ripples under their feet. Sparks shoot from a broken electrical fitting somewhere to the left. The environment is alive and violent and beautiful all at the same time, and these 2 men move through it like they were born inside chaos. You're not watching a fight anymore. You're watching a conversation, and you're starting to understand what they're saying to each other. Seagal is saying, I have seen everything. I know where this goes. You cannot surprise me. Every move you have, I have seen it before, felt it before, and found the answer before you were old enough to throw it. Come if you want. But I already know how this ends. And Jaw is answering, maybe, but I have never stopped moving in my entire life. My body doesn't know what tired means. My muscles were built from the ground up by people who turned training into a religion. You have experience. I have obsession. Let's see which one wins. The rooftop shudders. A gust of wind strong enough to push a grown man sideways tears across the surface, and both fighters lower their centers of gravity simultaneously, roots deepening, balance holding. That single moment tells you something profound about what you're watching. Because most people, when hit by unexpected force, stumble. These 2 settle. They were made for unstable ground. Tony Jaa launches into a sequence that happens so fast you'll need to rewatch it. Elbow, knee, elbow, kick, pivot, elbow again. The combinations flowing into each other without pause, without seam. One movement bleeding into the next the way water moves downhill. There's no gap for breath. No gap for thought. Just continuous, overwhelming pressure that would have finished any other person on Earth before they got halfway through the combination. Seagal absorbs it, not by taking the hits. That's the key. He's not there when the hits arrive. He slips to the outside of the elbow. He redirects the knee. He angles his body, and the kick lands on the thick muscle of his forearm instead of his ribs. Everything that should have landed doesn't land where it was aimed. And with each redirect, each slip, each subtle repositioning, he's turning Jaw's momentum against itself, pointing that river of energy somewhere other than its target. The third elbow, he doesn't just redirect. He catches the arm. And for a breathless half-second, Tony Jaa is controlled. You have to understand what that means. Tony Jaa is one of the most physically gifted human beings to ever step onto any kind of platform. His balance, his speed, his kinesthetic awareness, the ability to know where every part of your body is in space at every moment, is at a level that most athletes cannot even imagine. For him to be briefly, partially, momentarily controlled is like watching someone hold lightning in their hand. But briefly is not completely, and momentarily is not finally. Jaw's free leg sweeps. His body torques in the opposite direction from what physics seems to permit. He spins out of the lock with a move that looks like something a person shouldn't be able to do and answers with a flying knee that grazes Seagal's jaw and sends him sliding back 3 feet across the wet rooftop. Seagal slides. Does not fall. His rear foot finds the lip of a metal vent. Uses it. Pushes off. Comes back forward instead of backward. Converts the slide into a counterattack. The movement is so smooth you almost think it was planned. Maybe it was. The fighters separate again, both of them taking half a second to recalibrate, to breathe, to feel the edges of their own bodies and check what still works and what is beginning to complain. Seagal rolls his shoulder once. Josh shakes his left hand out, getting circulation back into fingers that were compressed during the lock. Small signs, human signs, reminders that these are not machines. These are men, extraordinary men, but men, feeling what everyone feels, just trained to keep going through it. The rain begins to ease slightly. Not stop, just ease, like the sky itself is taking a breath. And in that softer rain, in that moment of relative quiet, something shifts between the two fighters. Not hostility, not quite. Something more complicated. Something that exists in the space between opponents who have truly tested each other and found a kind of reluctant understanding on the other side of that test. Seagal looks at Ja for a long beat. Ja looks back, and without either of them deciding to, they both exhale at the same moment. The sound of the city comes back to you. You'd forgotten it was there. Traffic, music from somewhere far below, the structural hum of a building full of people living their lives. It floods back and around the edges of this moment and reminds you that the world is large and complex, and that what is happening on this rooftop is just one small piece of it. But somehow it has felt like everything. Seagal straightens slightly. His posture changes by just a degree or two. Still alert, still ready. But something in his bearing that was locked a moment ago has opened fractionally. He's not standing down, but he's acknowledging. There is a version of respect that only warriors can give each other and only warriors can receive. It doesn't require words. It doesn't require ceremony. It lives in the eyes, in the angle of the head, in the way you hold your hands when you're not throwing them. Tony Jaa tilts his chin. Experience or obsession, which one is deadlier? That's all. Just a small tilt. But you understand it completely. In his culture, in the deep traditions of the martial art he was raised inside, that gesture carries enormous weight. It is not submission. It is not retreat. It is the acknowledgement of a worthy thing, of a worthy opponent, of a fight that has elevated both participants rather than merely damaging them. The sparks from the broken fitting continue to rain down in a slow orange shower somewhere to the left. The puddles on the rooftop are perfectly still now between footfalls. The neon glow from below turns everything amber and blue and vaguely cinematic, like the world itself has decided this moment deserves to look like art. Because it does. You have just watched something rare. Something that exists at the absolute edge of human capability, where preparation meets instinct, where decades of disciplined practice collide with raw physical brilliance, where two completely different philosophies of combat meet on equal ground and find out, definitively, what each one is made of. Seagal's philosophy is stillness hiding violence. The idea that movement is expensive, that the best response to force is not equal force but correct positioning, that if you understand the geometry of conflict deeply enough, you never need to waste energy. You simply need to be in the right place. The strike never finds you because you have already moved calmly, without drama, without theater, to exactly where the strike isn't. This philosophy took him across the world, into dojos in Japan, into study so deep that he became one of the first Westerners to achieve a high-level black belt in Aikido while actually living and teaching in Japan, not just visiting. His body became an instrument of redirection, a thing that does not fight force but transforms it. Jaa's philosophy is something different. It is acceleration. It is the understanding that the human body, trained correctly, pushed to the absolute limit of what it can withstand, can generate force that transcends whatever you thought the limit was. His Muay background, the ancient form of Muay Thai that predates the modern sport by centuries, taught him that every part of the body is a weapon. Knees, elbows, shins, forearms, shoulders, head, all of it hardened, sharpened, made lethal through repetition so intense and so prolonged that the body eventually forgets it was ever soft. He didn't study this art in a comfortable gym. He grew up inside it, in rural Thailand, in conditions that would break most people before they got started. Two philosophies, one rooftop, and now a moment of stillness that somehow contains both of them, holds both of them, makes room for both of them without resolving the question of which one is greater, because that question, you're beginning to understand, might not have an answer. Or rather, The answer might be that both of them are greater than any single framing can contain. The camera, if this were a film, would be pulling back slowly now, widening the shot, letting the rooftop shrink within the larger darkness of the city, letting these two enormous figures become smaller against the skyline, not because they are small, but because the world is large and they exist within it, part of it, connected to everything around them. The rain has slowed to a mist now, almost nothing, just the feeling of moisture in the air, the suggestion of rain rather than its fact. And in that soft half-darkness, with the city humming beneath them and the clouds just beginning, to show the first hint of breaking, the two men face each other one last time. Seagal does not speak. He raises one hand, slightly, from his side. Not a wave, not a signal, just an acknowledgement. The kind a general makes to a worthy adversary on a field where the battle has been genuine and the respect is real. Jao watches this, and then he presses his palms together at his chest. A Y, the traditional Thai gesture of greeting and respect. Ancient, meaningful, not performed for the camera or for any audience. Performed because it is the truest and most complete expression of what he feels in this moment, which is honor. For the fight, for the man across from him, for the traditions that made both of them capable of standing on this rooftop in this rain doing what they just did. Seagal receives the gesture and nods. One single, slow, complete nod. And somewhere inside that nod is everything. All of it. The years of training, the miles traveled, the hours in dojos and gyms and empty rooms where you practice the same movement 10,000 times until it lives in your muscles rather than your mind. The injuries absorbed and worked through and survived. The philosophy developed slowly over decades of thought and practice and revision. The understanding, hard one, that the greatest opponent you face is never the person across from you, but the version of yourself that wants to quit, that wants to shortcut, that wants to settle for good enough when extraordinary is still available. Both of them learned that lesson. Both of them paid for that lesson. And on this rooftop, in this rain, in this city that doesn't know or care what just happened 20 stories above its constant noise and light, both of them have demonstrated that the lesson held. The mist continues. The city continues. Somewhere below, a child is looking up at the sky and wondering why the rooftop has sparks falling from it. Somewhere below, a taxi driver glances upward for a fraction of a second and then goes back to watching the road. Somewhere below, life is moving forward the way it always does, indifferent to the extraordinary things that happen in its margins. But you saw it. You were there for every step, every redirect, every flying knee, and every joint lock, and every moment of silence loaded with more meaning than most conversations manage in an hour. You felt the weight of two completely different worlds of martial knowledge pressing against each other and finding out that neither one breaks easily, that both hold, that both contain genuine and profound truth about what the human body and human will are capable of when pushed past every comfortable limit into the territory that most people never visit. Steven Seagal, a man who went to the other side of the world and gave a decade of his life to mastering an art form that his body was never originally built for, who returned changed in ways that went beyond physical, who carries in his stillness and his redirections an entire philosophical tradition about the relationship between force and emptiness, about how the most powerful response to aggression is often the most quiet one. Tony Jaa, a man who came from nothing and built everything through discipline so complete it became indistinguishable from identity, who carries in his every movement the weight and dignity of an ancient martial tradition, who honors that tradition with every elbow and knee and spinning kick by performing it at the absolute highest level a human body can achieve. Two legends, one Bloodward, and the question you're sitting with right now, the question that is going to stay with you long after the neon lights of this rooftop have faded from your memory, is not simply who would win. It's deeper than that. You're asking yourself what winning even means when both competitors are operating this far beyond ordinary. When the fight itself is the achievement. When the clash of these two philosophies produces something that transcends the sum of its parts. You're asking yourself what you believe in. Stillness or speed. control or chaos, the redirected river or the unstoppable current. You're asking yourself if it came down to one moment, one final exchange, one last attempt where everything was on the line and both men had nothing left to hide behind except what they truly are at their absolute core. Which one would you trust? Which one would you bet on? Because the fight isn't completely over. It never really is with people like this. The rooftop is quiet. The mist is soft. The city hums endlessly below. And Steven Seagal and Tony Jaa stand at opposite ends of this drenched, spark-scattered, neon-washed stage, looking at each other through the settling air, breathing, thinking, knowing that this story has chapters still to be written. The next time won't be a pause. The next time will be a conclusion, and you are going to need to see it.